And good evening from Mystery Island Studio. I'm John O'Loughlin, and welcome to my channel. It's called McDuff Lives, and wow, so much going on right now. It's amazing, and these weeks fly by. It's Thursday night. That means it's time for the TNT, the True Thursday Night Trio, and I see we've got a full deck over here in the chat room already. So let's get started. George and Professor Hamamoto, welcome to the show, and a happy Thursday.
Thank you, John. Happy Thursday to you. I can tell you've been writing.
Well, that's because I must be smiling because I got a couple pages done today. If I don't get a couple pages done, then I'm not smiling. You picked up on that.
Mm-hmm. We can sense it. You have that look.
Oh boy, it's amazing. I hate writing, but when you turn around and look at it and you say, "Gosh, I did that." That's like climbing a mountain or something. Not that I've climbed it yet, but I guess I'm about maybe a little past halfway up. It's
Excellent.
Yeah, it's quite a process. I also have to stop and do more research in the middle of it. You know how it is. You get to a question and you just can't go on until you go and look up the question. Well, anyway, Professor Hamamoto, let's start with you tonight. What would you like to bring up as our first subject of discussion?
Well, since George is down in San Diego, I wanted to, and he's in California, I wanted to talk about the extreme accumulation, not just of wealth, but of power that is concentrated, especially because there's a new book that's going to be coming out on big tech. And supposedly they're going to the author, I can't remember his name, is really going to go in on Laurene Powell Jobs. She lives up in Palo Alto, I guess. And so I'm interested in hearing the scoop with George, all those yachts down there and the boats and the ships and extreme concentration of power.
Yeah, guys, you won't believe this one. I got some stuff on George Hodel.
Oh, no.
That Dr. Hamamoto's working on, which I think will add to your story and supplant or, buttress, add some trestle to your story about George Hodel and the connections to Dulles in this recovery agency in Wuhan. That was after the war. But before we go there, I've got one of those billionaires actually complaining directly to San Diego County about us here at this charrette house. His name is James Jameson, and he is a billionaire from pipeline and water pipeline and Bell Helicopter, I believe, days, aviation. He also has links to the Exim Bank in the pipeline industry. He helped negotiate international pipelines between Mexico and California, sort of an Enron by the sea where we are here. So this guy is the real deal. He also took a sabbatical as a Benedictine monk. He's written a book called Capitalist at Large, which is sort of a self-congratulatory tour of the world. He credits him. He's on the board at Scripps, which maybe have gone a little bit out of its way. Also the Salk Institute. You may remember that one, John, with the polio vaccine. And, and General Atomics, throw Carter Page and the MQ-9 Reaper drone in there. I mean, he's touched them all. It's like he's Dewey Claridge's twin brother that got separated at birth, but they were in all the same businesses. And that's the guy who came after me. And maybe it's because I poked Dewey in the eye yesterday and poked it into his pipelines that he did with the Exim Bank. And maybe that's why he came after me. But he came after me great guns. And it was Steve Hodel who just came down to do a presentation, and we had a barbecue for him. And we had another visitor, two male visitors who were both vaccinated. And they had gotten their burgers and they went over to the table, and somebody had reported. I was 20 feet away reporting them, and this is inside a courtyard in this house. Someone reported it, and none other than James Jameson, billionaire, weapons and pipeline guy, is the guy who complained to San Diego County.
He's just a garden variety snitch.
I'm not kidding.
What a punk. What a tattletale.
I mean, in a way, it's like a kind of a confession in a way, because it's saying, hey, I work with Dewey, I work with Carter Page, I'm a drone guy, and hey, bioweapons, I probably do those too over at Salk, or not bioweapons, bioagents, let's call them. So I have the craziest trolls. I mean,
No.
I've got the guy who does BurningMan.com out of New Zealand, worth $19 million, has a private Steve Outram.
Steve Outram.
And I guess maybe somebody's impersonating him. That's the only thing I can think of, because it's such a self-confession. And also, this guy is really good friends with Doug Manchester, who owns the Tribune here, the San Diego Tribune.
Mm-hmm.
So I expect a workup in the Tribune tomorrow about how I'm a super spreader. He accused me indirectly of killing his brother. His brother has apparently died of COVID. And I don't know how I could do that, because we just got to San Diego. But I get myself in these messes when we're just trying to exercise the First Amendment, which last time I checked wasn't a cult. He accused me of leading a cult. You know, weird. You know, and literally the guys had just gone to the table with a burger. It was totally innocent, and both of them had been vaccinated, and he just went linear. So there you go.
Now, how did Jameson ID you, George?
I don't know how he ID'd me, but he included me by my full name, and he included all the names of the people who were with me.
Uh-huh.
And he made some mistakes about identities. And so it was pretty funny. Anyway, I just wanted to say that when you think you've turned the corner and people are being reasonable, I mean, literally, we've been like spacing out. You can see over here, like we're spacing out 6-8 feet. We're on this huge deck, and we've been trying to comply as best we can. So we're not trying to flaunt the rules or get anybody sick or anything like that. We're just trying to be a news organization like everybody else. And there you go.
Now, how did you know that this fellow Jameson ratted you out? Was there a name? Huh?
Yeah, he signed his name.
Oh, I see.
To the email, and so that's. And he went through, hey, I sold Bell helicopters, and I worked and sold clean water irrigation and probably oil and gas in Saudi Arabia. And, you know, George Bush, he was on George Bush's team. He was on the Helsinki team with Reagan for the Sherdzenayev summit meetings. He worked with Bijan Kiana at the Exim Bank. I mean, you want to talk about a deep state tour de force. I'm going to write a book about him called Deep State Tour de Force, because he's touched it. You name a deep state intrigue, he has touched that base.
Well, can I raise one name then that
Sure.
might add to it? Erasmus Lab. Is he connected to Erasmus Lab by any chance?
That would be the trifecta. We took a picture of all the names he was connected to, and we'll have that for you later. I think I might write a book about him. I might do the alter. But anyway, most of the research, it was funny, the whole day was dedicated to Dr. Hamamoto.
No.
Yeah, and George Hodel research. And so we weren't bothering anybody. You know, we were doing something 60 years ago in China, in Wuhan. And we were working on the year 1946. And this just came out of the blue, and it's a heavy-handed letter. And, you know, this was a serious he summoned all the senior defense tech execs here in San Diego to run me out of town. So there you go.
Well, George, you seem to have a knack for these trolls, high-level trolls going in on you.
Well, can I flip it back to you with the Hodel research?
Oh, absolutely.
Well, it turns out on the Black Dahlia, you were right. And Steve Hodel, the son, who basically says his dad committed these serial murders here, these girls all seem to work at these Nazi space camp type facilities. I don't know. It seems like all the Nazi space camp girls end up getting horrifically murdered. But and Elizabeth Short was this first gal who worked up at Vandenberg Air Force Base, where they did United States Missile Command. Anyway, so he's an LA cop, and he thinks that his dad just did all these serial murders. But as you know, Doctor, you were working on the hypothesis that George Hodel had some deep state connections in intelligence.
Mm-hmm.
And we drilled down on that. And sure enough, he did the relief agency in the Wuhan. It was 3 cities, one on each side of the Yangtze, but it was Wuhan for 7 months. He went there, and Alan Dulles sent him there. And
It
then
was under the auspices of the United Nations too, correct?
United Nations Relief and Restoration.
When is this, guys? What year?
1946. It's a 7-month period in 1946.
Dulles sends him?
Well, Dulles had it's called UNRRA. And then Dulles was named for just very briefly, and then he named the Lehman of Lehman Brothers. So officially he worked for the Lehman Brothers guy, George Lehman, I think his name was.
Mm-hmm.
But he then tells this whole, how bombed out the American bombers had bombed Wuhan, and there wasn't, it was called Hankow at that time on that side of the Yangtze, where the Wuhan virus lab is, believe it or not. And the Wuji lab is Soros's Wuji lab, believe it or not. And they talk about all the Japanese prisoners that were leaving, and Japan had conquered 70% of China. So if this is a period where prisoners were going in one direction and people were coming back to their houses in the other, and they couldn't, most of the deep water rigs and ships going up the Yangtze River were destroyed. So guess who they had to bring in to fly in medical supplies? Over the Himalayas. Over the bump.
The Flying Tigers?
Exactly. I predicted it. I said, I wonder how many pages it's going to get me to take me to Chenal, right? Because of Dan Hopsiker and Flying the Bump, and Dad, your stepdad or John or step grandfather, I can't remember which.
Right, Frank Coakley, who was a lieutenant colonel in the Army Air Force and flew the hump in the China, Burma, India theater, right?
And let's not forget Anna Chenot, his wife, who was very close to the White Russian people and the right wing of the Republican Party and Nixon and all those people.
His father, Hodel's father, was from Odessa, and his mother was from Kiev, and he
I'm sorry, go ahead.
IQ of 186. He still studied at Caltech out in Pasadena. You know all those rocket guys at JPL. I mean, you just can't make this stuff up. And he's like deep in intel from day one, White Russian intel in the space program. And then he gets sent over, and guess what? He starts 2 VD clinics near military bases in Chinatown.
Yes. He had an office there.
Yeah. In Los Angeles and San Francisco. And I'm saying, well, Steve, is there a hint of the drug trafficking there? Like just wild guess here. But anyway.
Well, George, this story is really connected to what you've been doing with, like Igor Kolomoisky.
Yeah.
He's known as Japonik, which is also my nickname. So I feel very close to the Ukrainian mobsters, and I think we should sit down. Just have a sit down like a mafia families. So what I've been doing since reading Hodel, I've been doing this anyway because I need to understand this problem from the grassroots, from a cultural perspective. So I start with Jabotinsky, one of the founders of modern Israel, and more recently reading Odessa stories. Isaac Babel, because I think that this is the group right now today in 2021 who's in the ascendancy right now. So it's interesting that it would go back generationally to George Hodel, to this very region, this hotly contested area that you've been in on for the last 4 going on 5 years now. It's incredible.
It truly is incredible. I never thought I would find this thing. I mean, I'm kicking over this thing, and we go up to Dewey Claridge, the CIA guy who was doing all this Project Blackjack stuff, and oh, by the way, this guy is a protege of this. James Jameson is a protege of the big new Basinski and Madeleine Albright, and these are all of his foreign policy buddies. And just you can't, and these helicopters have been going over us left and right. I know we're close to the military base, but all flying in low. I mean, all day long, all night long. It's really quite a scene.
Well, was not Joseph Korbel also Ukrainian? Madeleine Albright's father, the
Yeah,
security,
Corbel, yeah.
the planner, the geostrategic planner.
Czech, yeah,
Oh,
technically
Czech.
Czech, but
Uh-huh.
but they stay behind armies all the same with these Gladio armies, absolutely. So, and what's I the first thing that Michael Carlin, the filmmaker who came down and lectured us one day. Again, these are all day visitors. They're keeping their distance, right? Uh, he came down and talked about all these crime figures, and the first thing he did was he said, "Well, you guys should draw up a list of books about the deep state." I said, "I think I know a guy who hosts a video show that does that. His name's John O'Loughlin. He's got a book for him."
Yeah.
Yeah. So everything we've been doing
Wow.
has been the right thing for studying the deep state. This is just we're spot on, 100% on over the target.
Now, does Hodel subscribe to the extended analysis that I brought to the table? Because I extended his work. I mean, he only presented, not only, but he did incredible work forensically. But I put it in sort of a macro perspective. Does he buy my argument, Hodel?
I
Steve
presented
Hodel?
I presented your argument, which is truly brilliant, which is John Huston's running a confidence operation, sort of the Oconus lures in this house that's all wired for sound. And I found out what house it was. It's this Soden house, not the Snowden house, but the Soden house. It's a big, huge mansion. And George Hodel is doing this compromise operation. They're listening, have all these listening devices. A woman is killed and people hear the murder, but then they don't come in. So it's obviously a national security type thing. Gregory Peck is in and out. All these people in the John Huston stable, are coming in and out of this place. The drugs are coming into Chinatown from somewhere. It seems like the drugs are being used to compromise the Hollywood stars and writers. The ones that don't play ball seem like they get called communists, but it just seems like an intel operation from beginning to end. But Steve's he's not there yet. He's looking at it, but he's not quite there yet. He's more of the
Okay.
kind of gumshoe guy looking at the blood stains and stuff, and it's a good
Right.
complementary relationship I think we have.
Yeah, absolutely. And months ago, you were talking about the Maltese Falcon. Remember that? The exfiltration of people coming through probably Shanghai or maybe Hong Kong. And that whole intrigue, it's a Dashiell Hammett. He was a Pinkerton detective. So he was seeing all this traffic going through San Francisco. You're seeing it going out of LA and San Diego and San Pedro. But these are all ports, entrepot, right?
Yeah. Well, and you mentioned the ports. Hodel also had port relationships at the end of the Yangtze is Shanghai, and they were. I thought I saw the USS Nashville on one of the rivers in China, and I thought it was in Shanghai, which would have been McDuff on the Yangtze, but I don't know if that's true or not, or if I'm misremembering that.
No, that's true. I somewhere you find the little card I gave you.
Yep.
They did a commemorative photograph of the Nashville in the harbor there at Shanghai, and in fact, it was part of the Yangtze River Patrol for about 2 weeks in late '45 after the war was over.
Mm-hmm.
And
John, I alluded. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
Well, I didn't
No, I
realize
alluded.
that ocean liners
Go
go all the way up
go
to
ahead.
Wuhan. I didn't realize if the tide is in, ocean liners can go all the way up there. I did not know that. So
Is that the Yangtze right there?
yeah, the
That
Yangtze.
that
So
would
that's
be
Shanghai. That's the Bourse. It's called, I guess.
the Bund.
The Bund. Yeah.
Yeah.
And this is right where they have the different foreign concessions: German, French, Japanese, English, British.
But there was also a Bund in Wuhan, which I didn't know, in Hankow.
Mhm.
And Allies bombed it extensively. And so anytime you have these international trading concessions, that's
Yeah.
unfortunately where you find the drugs. And so, I mean, your senses of this were so uncanny, Doctor. And we studied it all day, and we just kept on saying, "Oh no, there's another Hamamoto victory there."
No,
Another card, another time he was right. And
well, I'm just following the stream here. I'm just, I'm going with it. But let me take the opportunity, George, for a sort of a bit of historiography. I sent this to you before you went down there, but I'm trying to not reconceptualize, but extend American as well as world histories, especially now in the 21st century, extended to conceive of the U.S. as also being Ibero-Asia. Iberian Asian. There's all this new scholarship that's saying, hey, it's not just about the pilgrims. It never has been. Even prior to that, the Iberian and the Asia trade was taking place even before there was an idea of American colonies conceived by John Dee. So we have to look at the history altogether in a radically new fashion. And you are in the ideal geographic position. You're in San Diego looking out in that direction. Ibero-Asia.
Yeah. Well, you're so right about Wuhan being the, it was Nanjing that Chiang Kai-shek had the nationalists, and then they were lost ground, in the Civil War after World War II to the communists and got pushed out all the way to Wuhan. So then they moved the headquarters to Chongqing, but there was a long time after the war that Wuhan was Chiang Kai-shek's capital, and that's what, of course, he was doing all the drug running to pay for the war against Mao Zedong, and just the huge CIA support. And who's the guy right there in the middle of it, getting all the UN relief to pay for all those planes to fly over the hump? It's George Hodel, and it's just amazing.
And don't we know who was the main, just for the record, while the financer for the Flying Tigers goes back to, was it one of those insurance guys like Star or something? Do you remember, George?
Oh yeah. It was Cornelius. Gun your engine if you're a drug dealer for Rahm Emanuel. It was Cornelius Vanderbilt had a company called the Star Alliance or something along that line.
Uh-huh.
And they were in business in mid 43. And I think I don't know exactly when they started flying the bump, but this goes back to AIG and Hank Greenberg, all the way to the Russian girls that sent in to take down Trump. This empire.
Like the Rockefellers, AIG has its start in China. They were trying to sell them on the idea of insurance, of life insurance. It was an alien concept, but that might have been just a front for all this subterranean type of dealing that was going on there. Just like the Rockefellers, supposedly they were selling oil for the lamps of China. That was their phrase, but they were setting up this giant black economy network in China.
Yeah, the whole Star Alliance and all that is right on the money, and John has nailed it again. Absolutely, this AIG life insurance I had heard was actually a way of inheriting the land of the coolie who had decided to change over his rice to opium. And this whole story of the Hmong and then moving, all the wars. And this is, again, read Servitors of Empire if you want to learn what happened from 1945 till now, because the Hmong and the drug business causes every war. Causes the Korean War as they move out of China. Mao kicks them out of China. Causes the Korean War. They move out of Korea. They go to Vietnam. Causes the Vietnam War. So, and we're still there in Korea today as a part of this drug trade. And it all comes back to one guy, George Hodel.
Well, George, you mentioned the Hmong. I ended my talk. I did a two-parter on Tony Anthony Bourdain. I ended my talk talking about General Vang Po of the Lao Royal Air Force, who was the head of the Hmongs and later relocated to Fresno, California, and Minneapolis, bringing that system back here in the U.S. But I went on Tony Bo and said that he is an intelligence asset himself, Anthony Bourdain. His deal is to go into places like Myanmar, which used to be called Burma, in order to renormalize them so that the World Bank, with the British Empire in the background and the U.S. going in there to recolonize that whole area. In other words, they're trying to do a replay of the imperial playbook, but using soft diplomacy and this affable, kind of slightly snarky individual named Anthony Bourdain, whose father, his name is Pierre Bourdain. We don't even know what his background was. Maybe he was with the Vichy or the Sûreté, but he has some kind of shady backgrounds as well. And again, you have this process of creating rogue states, right? North Korea, whatever, Burma, Myanmar. And then you have these intelligence assets. It could be Julia Child, who used to be with the OSS. It could be Martin Yan, who's trying to bring friendly China and panda bears. It's kind of like ping pong diplomacy. It seems trivial, but it has substantive importance. So that's Tony Bo.
We actually have, John, you know who Carol is, right? She's going to be at the charrette. Her father took Ho Chi Minh down the I don't know what river it is to get to Ho Chi Minh City after the war, but you did the story about them tasking all the weapons in Okinawa and giving half of them to Ho Chi Minh to make sure we had endless war in Vietnam. So yeah, in Bourdain, I had heard somehow his father had interacted with Ho Chi Minh. It was like the Ho Chi Minh. So a crazy story like that, and spoke Vietnamese and everything. And but you're quite right about Lord Mountbatten's Burma, which later became Myanmar. Rich in oil. It's the place where the Belt and Road pipeline goes, the first big cutaway that got you around going to the Malacca Straits, which is a pain in the butt if you're in shipping. So that's why the Belt and Road going to Myanmar. But the number one thing is the rain, the torrential rains and the monsoons. Everyone talks about making meat helmets in Rangoon, but actually it's the rain in Rangoon that's so muddy, and that's where you need Chenault's planes flying over the bump. So it's just amazing how this stuff ties together.
And since we're on the opium world economy, I went in on Joan Rivers. Her husband is a Warburg, Edgar Rosenberg. He was born during the Weimar Republic and was educated in Britain in some of the best public schools at the time. So he was part of this sort of international high-level stratum of bankers, but he was a Warburg. And what did he do? In addition to discovering, quote unquote, Joan Rivers, he brought her to prominence. He was a producer, guess who, for the United Nations. And he directed a movie called The Poppy is Also a Flower, which was introduced by Princess Grace of Monaco, another asset. And it's about the opium problem and how the United Nations is getting a grip and a handle on it, so they can create these rogue nations that Tony Bo later on can go there and normalize through appreciating their cookery. At the same time, by funding the whole deep state, the whole international dope economy, the trafficking, the dope, and the dark arms, as you've laid out, George. So that's it. Edgar Rosenberg, Warburg on the left. That's him on the left. He committed, quote unquote, suicide, just like Joan Rivers died of not autoerotic. She died of asphyxiation, just like Tony Bo and Robin Williams and David Carradine, except she got it during outpatient operation.
Yeah. I was just going to say Warburg was down in, obviously, helped form the Federal Reserve down in Jekyll Island there. I went and visited that little location and saw the oak table and all that, where they were all hiding out. So anyway, this deep state stuff is fun, if nothing else. And what we're trying to do, I mean, I put out 2 other books this week in paperback, Deep State about Henry Kissinger, and I put out another one on how China got the virus about Fauci and Redfield. And I just think, I believe in Toto. I'm going to get a t-shirt. Toto pulls back the curtain. Everybody realizes it's just this small deep state cabal, and everybody says, I'm not afraid anymore. And we lose our 9-part sphere and we win. So there you go.
All right. And Kamala Harris will say, I'm melting. Susan Rice, that's even better. George, but the real question I want to know is, have you been to the Dell yet?
Yeah, we went over there. We were supposed to meet with some Navy SEALs. We were supposed to go to the location where there was a fight between Chris Kyle, the sniper, American sniper, and Jesse Ventura. And Jesse, I had challenged him because I had heard that he had roughed Chris up a little bit, and he didn't show. So Jesse, if you're still out there, it's a standing challenge to meet you down there at the McPhee. I had a chance to talk to at that location the CEO of OAN, and we talked a long time about covering the book signing up in Long Beach. We were going to go out on Elon Musk's rocket launch pad, and he thought that was interesting, but there was a little bit of waves that day, so that got canceled. And we're talking also to MAGA TV down here for syndication, so hopefully we can get you guys on this show. This is where you log into your television, and it's Netflix, and then the next one's MAGA TV, and then there's Dr. Hamamoto, and there's John OLoughlin. So
Wonderful. Yeah, because I'm doing a new podcast series on true crime at the university.
is that the one you're doing with Peter Duke?
Well, I'm not doing with it. He's giving me some really good suggestions. Him and Tracy Connors. I was on their show yesterday.
I thought, yeah,
But
great.
yeah, so instead of saying, "Hey, we need to reform this and that and do away with political correctness and social justice curriculum," I'm just going to study the pattern, just like Steve Hodel. I'm going to study crimes, murder, mayhem, injury, fraud that take place in these little autonomous zones called universities. And from there, the reform will come, not from moral suasion. But I'm going to take the Generoso Pope approach of the National Enquirer. You just hit them with the smut. Say, this is what's going on here. Then their moral high ground and their authority in the society begins to erode. Then you can attack them politically, right? This is what happened in the case of Bill Gates. The independent press and the media came at him so hard, they just kept pounding his reputation that eventually Mindy had to throw in the towel.
Yeah, well,
It works.
I did put out a double in size Corona Man cometh about Bill Gates and Jeff Epstein and their relationship to CRISPR companies. Pick them. There's one of a dozen that could have CRISPR'd in this unbelievable cleavage site, this furin cleavage site, never before seen in 70 years of coronavirus. But now the furin cleavage site's right there to make, coronavirus 10 times more pathogenic, and transmissible. So yeah, that's available, and thought I'd just throw a book plug in.
Well, I had a question. I had a question for John. John, what does this tell you when people, top level people at the CDC and the NIH are starting to resign? Like they're in for a day and they quit. No one wants the Redfield job.
I didn't know that was going on, but it's certainly is telling. I've seen a lot of indications that the idea of quote lab leak unquote is now an acceptable thing to say, which is great progress. As a matter of fact, I think it really is the dividing line where people are going to start realizing that this is all a bioweapon. I mean, this is my firm opinion. But there's an awful lot of people now that are coming out with the same thing, or at least, major news people are coming out and saying that it's possible. And then what was it? Redfield himself that said that he thought that was the most likely etiology, to use my old knowledge of medical terms. Etiology, that just means where'd it come from?
Well, etiology is important, and there's a new story out by Jim Hoff at the Gateway Pundit, and the can't remember the gentleman's name, the colonel who had worked in biowarfare for 30 years in the U.S. Army, but he's got a new article out that supports very much what I've said, that this was leaked from NATO and Johns Hopkins University through the Eastern Command Center in Japan, the military command structure in Nanjing. And then we had IP traffic going there from 2016 to Nanjing. And then it was passed as a bioweapon. And the way that the Wuhan folks actually got a hold of it, this is this colonel speaking in Jim's publication, that they uncovered it in March timeframe of 2019. And they put a team of young scientists on the case and to work on it and isolate it in a non-human lab, in a primate lab, a BSL-3 lab. And then that was a part of, I don't know how to say it, Guangzhou, which is the Southern Medical University in China. And they had actually isolated it. And that's how supposedly the virus got to Zhang Li's, something very close to what ended up being COVID-19, but it was always contained. It never was released. But you're going to find, I think, that the real leak is going to match where the real IP addresses match, going back to 2016, back to the military command structure in China, and the NATO games meaning intelligence back channel, giving them this thing to test in 2016. Jim Hoft out today, Gateway Pundit. Check out the Colonel.
Okay.
And remember what we said about the IP traffic to Nanjing and Johns Hopkins University in Nanjing.
Now, George, was there any IP traffic through South Korea? Because aren't they part of the nexus there, South Korea?
Yeah, we didn't have it for the particular person who worked for the Supreme Allied Commander of NATO. For that person, there was some traffic to the national, statistics gathering biosurveillance company in Singapore. So we didn't have Korea per se. The National University of Singapore also did non-human work, primate work with the virus as well, and that Zhengli had a Zhou, ZHOU, had moved it from bats to primates there. But I don't have the monkey lab. I don't have the Daegu monkey lab involved in the chain at this point. Where the Shenzhen virus super spreader cult is. I don't have them, other than we know that they had a huge breakout there. And we know they were in Wuhan. So
now, where was Ambassador Harry Harris around this time? I know he wasn't ambassador yet, but where was he being held? Where was he stationed? Let's say positioned. Harry Harris. Do you know?
Well, you know the whole Hirohito story and this kind of super militaristic Bushido cult that he kept, sort of like the Nazis, the NATO, sort of like the Nazis with the Mengele Nazis, the bio Nazis. And they brought the bio, looks like they brought it back to Nanjing and had the Unit 731 lab in Nanjing. And it looked like they didn't bring it all the way back to Japan because the United States immediately went into warfare with Korea. So we do believe that South Korea and the Daegu lab is the place to look for Harry Harris's involvement. And he is the ambassador of South Korea, is he not? So he has a diplomatic cover.
Right.
So
that's why I raised the question. He was brought in there, I suspect, in order to do a sweep of some sort or to suppress any sort of leakage of information. Remember, there's another South Korean connection there that you've been on this, and it's been such a long time ago, George, that you had reviewed this. You might have forgotten, but that's the Orr connection, OHR. Bruce Orr and his father, Genosuke Orr.
Yeah. So Teledyne Hua Chang in Corvallis, Oregon was where his father did his graduate work. And there was a couple of key metals that were needed in the Navy reactors to shrink the reactors and control the reactions on nuclear submarines. And hafnium was one of them. And I can't remember, beryllium was another. And that his dad was involved in these embrittlement of these metals at Oak Ridge National Laboratories. And he, of course, Bruce Orr was a scholar growing up in Oak Ridge High School. But then when he went to Brookhaven, where the Jeff Epstein operations seemed to be, he seemed to get more into using the irradiation and the nuclear accelerators and the particle accelerators to start modifying organisms, knocking out genes, and sort of a precursor to CRISPR. And, the National Institute of Health is up there that worked on the Human Genome Project there, not Woods Hole, but it's the other one, Cold Spring Harbor. And the Brookhaven lab has the accelerator. So he got involved up in Port Jefferson in that whole Robert Mercer kind of bailiwick. And I haven't totally sussed out the Bruce Orr connection yet, but I very much suspect, like you do, Doctor, that there's a very scientific connection here. These are really handlers for scientists coming and going, infiltrating and exfiltrating secrets. Nellie Orr was running CIA's MITRE Corporation, which manages most of our federally funded research and development sites. they're more scientists than they are spies, and that was why they were so bad at it. And then they were trying, you try to roll them into being spies to take down Trump, and then you can bury all the evidence of all the operatives that they called to move secrets in and out.
Mm-hmm. Excellent.
Yeah.
John?
Well, the only other thing I wanted to bring up tonight was what I'm going to call mask apartheid. Are we looking now at here's my introduction to that. You were our governor here, Larry Hogan, a Republican, kind of a deep state Republican, if there's such a thing. He has announced that there's going to be a Maryland lottery giveaway, and it's going to be $40,000 for 40 days. And on the last day, it's going to be $400,000. And guess what you have to do to enter? Get your vaccination. If you get a vaccination, then you could be the lucky one or the lucky 40. Be the first kids on your block, to get the $40,000. I mean, wouldn't that be great? It's bribery, but it's worse than bribery because it's unconstitutional deprivation of equal protection. How can the state run a lottery and give away free tickets, but only to people that they choose? Only the ones that have had a certain medical procedure. I just don't see it flying past any type of constitutional challenge. On the other hand, is anybody going to bother to challenge it? And is this the slippery slope that's going to get us to the as Sybil Edmonds says, the yellow badges? Are we going to have to wear yellow badges? Those of us that choose not to participate in the experiment. That's my topic. I'm concerned that we are allowing them to do that little camel's nose under the tent thing to completely erode our civil liberties, and then there'll be the shaming that'll come along behind it to make sure that those of us that don't like their idea are kept silent and isolated, and they won't let me go to my favorite store anymore, probably, that kind of thing. And just break us down slow, and we have to stop it before it gets to that point, is my point.
Absolutely. There's a self-described American witch. She's an author. Her name is Shirley Jackson. As you know, I'm really interested in American Gothic. To me, it's the overriding, not just metaphor, but reality of much of American colonial and national history. But Shirley Jackson, as most school kids remember, is the author of that story, The Lottery. Remember reading that one, John, in junior high school, The Lottery?
Maybe.
Maybe.
Sounds sort of familiar. The red badge of courage. Was it like that?
Probably it had to do with bloodletting, right? And I think, John, what the Governor Hogan and Kimi Hogan, his wife, the First Lady, they're watching your show because we've talked about gamification. So they figured out how to gamify genocide.
Exactly.
Yeah.
It's just have fun.
Well, this nanoferritin slough that's coming off people's skin, the sloughing, and then spontaneous abortions, and this, these uteruses that are, spontaneously happening, that are, devolving, and these heavy periods, women who haven't had periods all of a sudden having periods. This pro-oxygenation and heavy iron load capability that's being added is potentially a tracking mechanism by DARPA. DARPA starts out in 2013 giving a $25 million seed round to Moderna. People don't know that the seed round, the very first money that Moderna ever got, was DARPA money, right? And it was for mixing battlefield vaccines. And the idea is you take whatever is the agent, you isolate the agent, you grind the agent, and do a subunit of of the virus, the antigen, and then you use that as a vaccine loaded onto a nanoferritin platform, right? But the advantage of nanoferritin is that it could increase your cross section of some type of electromagnetic pulse. So there's new machines. I can't remember which Stryker I thought made one, and now the White House supposedly has 130 people that have been hit with this EMP gun. It could be that this heavy nanoferritin blood load, this heavy iron blood load that people are getting, lights up, literally. And this could be, I know Lena Poo was talking about this with 5G as a potential Internet of Things kind of tracking. And then for crowd control, I mean, it's not 5G like low energy, it's the big wave. It was like Imperius or something like that was the company, but Stryker also, gun your engine if you're a drug dealer for rum. But yeah, I think there's something here with DARPA, something wicked this way comes. Something DARPA this way comes with this, and we don't know the whole answer.
Well, one of the weapons, the covert weapons that people are overlooking are those temperature guns. Those are a misnomer, and those fit right into this idea of tracking and tracing, and also agitating the membranes and the red blood cells. So when they come after you at the casino or the restaurant, remember we were down there in August, and that woman who has no medical license came after us with a temperature gun. Remember that coffee bar we were at?
Yeah.
I said, "Hey, man, drop dead. I'm out of here." Yeah. But that is a weapon. That is one of those, not an IR weapon, but an EMF type weapon in the guise of a temperature gun. This is according to Lena Poo, since you cite her. Yeah.
Well, I definitely think there's a bio ID capability there because, DARPA is working on this tag and trace, and like other people have said, it could be that just you do the iron loading. You get the people the idea of doing heavy iron loading, and then you can figure out what you want to program in later on with the synthetic RNA with the Moderna. So all you have to do is really prove out the delivery mechanism right now, the nanoferritin, and then we'll come back later with some other load, some other bio load.
And so it's like an unpopulated circuit board in electronics. Right, and then you come in with the IC later. You can plug in the modules, whatever it is, to achieve the desired outcome.
Now, in the Moderna case, you're supposed to make your own vaccine. You're supposed to have your antigen present to your antibodies, and your antibodies, save you. But it could be worse. They could present something that causes your body to go into cytokine storm as well. So it's a double-edged sword here. And unless you're a biochemist, you don't necessarily know what's going on. I just think that's an awful lot of power to put in Larry Hogan's hands. And look at the guy who's running the WHO, Tedros, not a doctor. The only thing he ever did was either cover up or missed 3 cholera epidemics in his own Ethiopia to kill a rival tribe. And for that, they rewarded him and made him head of the WHO. And who's his biggest benefactor? Bill Gates. And Klaus Schwab.
John, what of this talk saying that Klaus Schwab is on shaky grounds so far as his leadership, and that he's about to be swapped? Is that just some diversionary disinformation that we're hearing?
Oh, I wouldn't think so. I think he's going to take a big hit. Where's my copy of his? I have his book, the COVID 19 and the Great Reset, and he wrote it's a script for how the world is supposed to look according to Klaus Schwab. And what it is using it's like he's been waiting for this opportunity, this golden opportunity to change the world and make it a better place for Klaus Schwab. And I think he's really getting busted now. I think so. I think shows like ours have done some good, because how can he have predicted so much and had such a plan put out? Did anybody ever look at their website? I don't even know if it's still up there or not. World Economic Forum. Andy, does it still have the thing with the wheels within wheels? It had a big wheel like a flower, but each of the petals had another wheel inside of it, and you could just delve into it forever. It was the Great Reset COVID response thing, and it was an incredibly elaborate thing. And um, oh God, that is frightening. Oh.
That could be the replacement for Klaus Schwab. I think they're going to probably put a woman in there. They put him purposely because he looks like a villain from a James Bond movie, but they're going to put a kinder, gentler figure in there, probably a female head of the world. That's my prediction. If
Go to that one that
he's
says
going down.
platform there, Andy. I'm sorry, Professor. I just don't
Okay.
know. Yeah, the one that says platform, Andy. The World Economic in the you skipped it again. COVID Action Platform. Go to that.
COVID Action Platform. What a name. Take out small countries with
Now, I realize this was produced and ready. I mean, over a year ago.
Yeah.
And that's just a little tiny taste of what I remember seeing. It was like you could you could see about 100 different categories around a big circle, and then you could poke any of those ones, and it would break that down into another circle that had another bunch of categories around it.
Mm-hmm.
It was somebody's dream of how to reorganize the world.
Mm-hmm.
And all they needed was a COVID-19 to come along, and they could launch the program. And guess what? It came along just in time for Klaus to launch his program. And now Klaus is I think he's taking a lot of justified criticism. I don't know about other places. I think that there's enough skepticism in the United States now that it's not going to work. But we're, like I said before, I really do feel like we're on the cusp of it, because they maybe they do some other big thing, they have some big outbreak, or version 4 comes along, or version 5 comes along, and everybody gets scared, and we all have to just give up our rights and do it. I don't know, but right now I feel like I'm feeling pretty good, to answer your question.
Well, I just saw yesterday, and this is on huge back order. Even if you order it, it's going to take a couple weeks to get it. And this is from DARPA.com, otherwise known as Amazon. But there's a new book by Dr. Joseph Mercola on this, and the analysis is there. And I only read the first 2 chapters, George, and the chronology is very much, it's like it's overlaps, completely with yours, almost exactly. And the foreword is by Robert F. Kennedy Jr. And that tells me that there's a general public out there that is so interested and wants to know so much that they can't keep the book in stock. So I think you're right, John, that we are on the cusp of a change here for the better. But we can't let our guard down. But we also have to recognize the fact that this work is having positive consequences.
Yeah, you're talking about a guy, Klaus Schwab, World Economic Forum, who co-sponsored, along with Bill Gates and Melinda Gates, the Event 201 prediction of a pandemic the same day we had a worldwide super spreader outbreak in Wuhan at the NATO military games. So, if it wasn't, it's really like saying, I think Kennedy's going to be shot 15 minutes before shots ring out in Dallas. It shows foreknowledge. Like John said, all that material was prepared. Mm-hmm. It shows he's aching for a great reset. He's aching for a fourth industrial revolution, where all of his robotics, Asher Weiss, Sulzer, are needed. The humans aren't needed so much who don't vaccinate. And I wrote a book about it called Schwabi No More, of course. I always write a book about it. But it is good to get the stuff out there with the evidence in line. And I do think that people do realize now that the timing here, Kennedy will be killed in 15 minutes, and then 15 minutes later, Kennedy's killed. That's the kind of timing you had with Klaus Schwab and Bill Gates with Event 201 and coronavirus. So there you go.
It reminds me of how many of the horrible shooting events that had an exercise going on at the same time. That is very much a chilling analogy to think of, that they had an exercise going on at the same time. And that is a pattern, I'm afraid. It's not just once or twice. It is a big pattern. And that is a signature, really, of their work.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And all killers leave signatures, even Dr. George Hodel. They're called signature killers for a reason. They can't help it. Part of it is pride and craftsmanship. They want to take credit for it. The other is inadvertent. There's no way they cannot leave some sort of signature. It could be an IP address. It could be, who knows, other forms of telltale culpability. I agree, John. Yeah.
We have Chris, the IP hunter, with us down here all week, and that's been great. And gun your engine if you're drug dealing. I love it when people leave footprints. And speaking of that, few people know this, but Dr. George Hodel was also a lieutenant general in the Chinese Nationalist Army, an honorary general. He's pictured with a lot of generals like Chiang Kai-shek, who was in the drug business.
Mm-hmm.
So, at some point when all your pictures are with generals in Wuhan, and that was their headquarters, and you bring in Chenault, which is the drug airline, at some point if you have enough Chinatown VD clinics, you're going to be accused of being a drug runner. And the Nazis had no other way to go. These space Nazis that were being interned at places like Vandenberg Air Force Base, the precursor Army base, had no place to turn. They had to go to the Julie Swetnick, if you will, the secretary, and have the gang rapes to compromise these people in order to put their guys in to the U.S. Missile Command. I know it sounds horrible, but these people are capable. Nazis are capable of horrible murders too. And I really I call this the Q loophole, because the highest level of clearance is not a DOD clearance in our country. It's the DOE Q clearance. And John's dad put all the military intelligence together, but the one thing he couldn't get, the Q clearance, because it was DOE. And where did they find the Nazi files? Up in Greenbelt, Maryland, at the National Archives, in the Q section. This is going to be, I think, the answer to the test, the McDuff mystery of the 68,000 files. It's the Nazi Q. Give me those Q files, and I'll tell you who killed Elizabeth Short.
George, are you going to do a book not on the X files but the Q files?
I might.
Oh,
I might call it McQ.
That's perfect.
Yeah. After going to McP and Jesse Ventura backing down, I might call it McQ.
Okay.
He's a big guy. I realize he's a little bit older now, but come on, Jesse. Come on down. Coronado.
Well, he's too busy surfing down in Mexico. He
Sure.
doesn't even live in the U.S. anymore. He wants to run for president? Come on.
In Mexico.
Yeah, the Estados Unidos de Mexico. Yeah, that's good for him.
Gosh, this was fun, guys. Let's do it again soon. I'm running out of better, but there you go.
Thank you for the updates, George.
Yes, thank you all for the updates. And boy, let's be careful out there.
Thank you,
Good
John.
night, everybody. Thank you.
All right. Thanks, John. Thanks, everybody.
Thanks, Doctor.
All right. Thanks, George. Bye-bye.